You are listening to PR Radio Station of America.
It began on an otherwise ordinary Friday afternoon when news alerts lit up phones and laptops around the world. President Trump had signed a proclamation imposing a $100,000 fee on H-1B visas, the highly prized permits that allow skilled foreign workers to take jobs in American companies. For years, these visas had been the lifeline of Silicon Valley, Wall Street, and countless startups. Now, with a single signature, the cost of bringing in talent seemed to explode overnight. The announcement was brief and unclear. Was the new fee only for fresh applications, or would it apply to renewals too? Could it even trap workers who already had valid visas? No one knew. In boardrooms, executives flipped through printed copies of the order, highlighting ambiguous phrases. On social media, frantic discussions erupted, with some people assuming the worst. The proclamation lacked the kind of precision normally expected for a policy affecting hundreds of thousands of families, and that vagueness bred fear. Within hours, tech giants like Microsoft, Amazon, and Google scrambled to interpret the rules. Human resources departments called emergency meetings. Lawyers were on the phone late into the night. Goldman Sachs circulated memos warning employees not to travel internationally until further notice. Entire departments were thrown into chaos as managers worried that their best engineers, analysts, and developers might be barred from returning if they left the country. For companies already struggling to fill specialized roles, the fee looked like a new wall blocking access to global talent. The shock extended beyond offices into living rooms. Families with loved ones abroad began to panic. A worker in North Carolina canceled his flight to India after hearing about the change. Parents phoned children studying in America to ask if they were safe. WhatsApp groups in Bengaluru, Beijing, and Seoul exploded with messages as relatives weighed whether to rush back to America before the rules took effect. The uncertainty blurred lines between professional decisions and deeply personal sacrifices. By the time the sun set, panic was spreading across time zones. Some interpreted the proclamation as a total freeze, others as a looming deadline. Allies abroad expressed concern, while visa holders packed bags or purchased last-minute tickets. The lack of clarity created a worst-case mindset everywhere. A measure that was meant to put American workers first instead ignited a wave of fear that stretched from Washington to the busiest airports around the world. Stage 1 of the story set the tone, a confused and frightened scramble triggered by one sudden presidential order. As news spread, households across the world entered panic mode. In India, WhatsApp groups for H-1B workers lit up with frantic messages. Should we return now? Will we lose our jobs? Parents called children studying in America, their voices shaking with worry. A manufacturing engineer in North Carolina, who had planned to visit relatives in India, canceled his flight within minutes of hearing the news. His words summed up the mood. There was panic among H-1B holders, and no one knew what might come next. The fear spilled into airports. Families packed hurriedly, booking last-minute tickets, desperate to return to America before the rules could trap them abroad. At San Francisco International Airport, a flight to Dubai descended into chaos. Some passengers refused to board, believing they might be locked out of America if they left. The captain, caught on camera, called the situation unprecedented. Travelers sat for hours as arguments broke out over whether to continue the journey. A single order from Washington had managed to disrupt global travel patterns within hours. Inside corporate offices, panic turned into strategy sessions. Tech giants like Microsoft, Amazon, and Goldman Sachs sent urgent emails warning employees not to leave America under any circumstances until more details were known. Managers canceled planned business trips. Recruitment departments froze international hiring. For companies dependent on foreign talent, even a few days of uncertainty felt like a disaster. Executives worried about projects stalling, contracts breaking, and skilled workers abandoning jobs out of fear they would be locked out. Online platforms magnified the fear. On Reddit threads and Chinese social app Rednote, visa holders described abandoning holidays and business deals halfway through. Some wrote about landing abroad only to immediately book return flights. Others posted videos from airports showing families in tears, children clutching suitcases, unsure if they would ever see their homes again. Hashtags like hashtag visa crisis and hashtag H-1B panic trended across Twitter and Instagram. The misinformation mixed with real stories, creating a perfect storm of confusion and hysteria. Governments around the globe scrambled for answers. India's foreign ministry issued a statement calling the fee a humanitarian concern that disrupted families. South Korea's officials, still rattled by a recent immigration raid in Georgia, said they were closely monitoring developments. Meanwhile, companies and workers braced for the worst-case scenario. For 24 tense hours, the perception was that America's doors could slam shut without warning. What began as a policy announcement had transformed into a worldwide scramble, leaving an entire community of skilled workers and their families on edge. India, home to the majority of H-1B visa holders, was the first to react strongly. Officials in New Delhi warned that the new fee could have humanitarian consequences, splitting families and leaving children stranded. The foreign ministry called the situation deeply concerning and said they were urgently studying the full implications. Indian news outlets broadcast non-stop coverage, interviewing engineers who canceled trips and parents who feared their children studying abroad might never return. The story became a national headline, sparking anger and fear across the country. China, the second-largest beneficiary of H-1B visas, issued its own statement saying the policy created unnecessary obstacles for global cooperation. Families in Beijing and Shanghai began canceling travel, worried they might lose their legal status in America. South Korea, already shaken by an immigration raid on a Hyundai factory in Georgia earlier that month, expressed that it was paying close attention to the new rules. Korean business leaders said the move threatened ongoing investments in the United States, and officials hinted at raising the issue in trade negotiations. Meanwhile, inside America, Silicon Valley entered emergency meetings. Executives at Amazon, Google, Meta, and Apple demanded clarification from Washington, warning that thousands of projects could stall if skilled workers became stuck abroad. Internal company memos described the fee as a direct attack on innovation and competitiveness. HR departments scrambled to reassure frightened employees, while CEOs made late-night calls to lawmakers, asking them to intervene. The technology sector, long reliant on H-1B visas, was suddenly facing its most destabilizing moment in decades. The visa crisis even spilled into international trade negotiations. India and the United States had been working to resolve disputes over tariffs, but New Delhi now said the visa fee would complicate discussions. Diplomats warned that relations could sour if families were torn apart and businesses crippled. European allies also expressed concern, noting that the abrupt policy sent a message of unpredictability at a time when global cooperation was already fragile. What began as an immigration announcement was quickly transforming into a full diplomatic standoff. For the millions of individuals actually holding H-1B visas, the fallout was deeply personal. Manufacturing engineers, coders, and financial analysts reported sleepless nights, worried that the fee might apply retroactively. Some had weddings planned abroad that they were now considering canceling. Others admitted they were considering resigning rather than living under constant uncertainty. Social media platforms filled with stories of broken plans, abandoned vacations, and families holding emergency meetings to decide whether to stay in America or return home. At the heart of the storm were ordinary people, caught in a policy shift they barely understood. After nearly 24 hours of panic, the White House attempted to clarify the order. Officials insisted that the $100,000 fee would only apply to new applications and not to renewals or existing visa holders. They emphasized that families currently abroad could still return without paying the fee. The statement was pushed out on X by the White House Rapid Response account, claiming the proclamation had been misunderstood. But by then, airports had already been filled with panicked travelers, and companies had already issued frantic advisories. The reassurance felt like a bandage on a deep wound. To make matters worse, not every official was on the same page. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick had earlier told reporters the fee might apply annually, sparking further uncertainty. Later, White House spokesperson Caroline Leavitt contradicted him, saying it was a one-time levy per petition. The conflicting narratives left visa holders and companies unsure who to believe. Legal experts filled TV panels, trying to parse the language of the proclamation like a riddle, while immigrants' rights groups accused the administration of deliberate ambiguity. Workers caught in the storm began sharing their stories online. One engineer described how he canceled his flight to visit his parents in India, losing thousands in non-refundable tickets. Another woman posted on Rednote that she had landed in London for a wedding but booked the next flight back to America after hearing the news, afraid she would not be allowed to re-enter. Many expressed anger that they had been forced to make life-changing decisions based on half-truths and rumors. For them, the clarification came too late. Inside corporate America, the clarification did little to calm nerves. Companies like Microsoft, Amazon, and Goldman Sachs criticized the White House for its lack of transparency. Internal emails leaked to the press showed executives accusing the administration of jeopardizing America's role as a global hub for talent. CEOs argued that the confusion itself had already damaged trust, and some privately warned lawmakers that America's reputation for stability was being undermined. The episode, they said, would make skilled workers think twice about building a life in the country. Even with the government's reassurance, the trust of workers and foreign governments was already shaken. Many felt the clarification was too little, too late, because the message was clear. Their lives could be thrown into chaos with a single presidential signature. Families who had rushed back early now regretted missed weddings, funerals, and family reunions. Governments like India and South Korea demanded more transparency moving forward, but diplomats admitted privately that confidence in Washington had been damaged. The walk back had calmed the fire, but the smoke of distrust lingered in the air. Even after the White House clarified the order, families were left with scars. Parents who had rushed back early missed birthdays and weddings. Some children cried in airport terminals as they watched one parent board a plane, uncertain when they would see them again. Workers described feeling like they were living in limbo, never knowing if the next proclamation would force them to leave. A few said they had already started looking at opportunities in Canada or Europe, unwilling to risk such upheaval again. For many, the greatest damage was not the fee itself, but the uncertainty it created. Immigration attorneys noted a spike in calls from terrified clients who no longer trusted official guidance. Tech forums filled with messages from visa holders wondering whether to withdraw from the American job market altogether. Some admitted that the episode confirmed their worst fears, that their futures could be erased overnight by a single policy change. The trust that America had long enjoyed as a safe destination for global talent was shaken to its core. Inside corporate America, boardrooms began to rethink their reliance on the program. Some executives quietly discussed moving more operations overseas to avoid unpredictable immigration rules. Others floated the idea of lobbying Congress for a permanent fix, arguing that the constant turbulence was hurting competitiveness. For many CEOs, the chaos proved that relying heavily on the visa system was a risk too big to ignore. Shareholders pressed for answers, while employees demanded guarantees that their futures would not hang on the next proclamation. Foreign governments did not let the issue fade quietly. Indian officials pressed for assurances in trade talks that their citizens would not be treated like pawns in political games. South Korea lodged formal concerns, and European diplomats hinted at raising the matter in international forums. The message was clear: America's immigration decisions were no longer seen as isolated policies, but as actions that could destabilize global trust and cooperation. Washington found itself under new scrutiny, not just for its policies, but for its credibility. As the dust settled, the story of the fee became less about dollars and more about people. Workers like Rohan Singh, who canceled his trip home, shared that the experience had changed how he saw his adopted country. Advocates warned that the chaos proved how fragile immigrant lives could be under shifting political winds. Analysts on news programs summed it up simply: the administration had won praise from hardliners, but at the cost of spreading fear among families, companies, and allies. The policy might have been clarified, but its impact would echo long after the headlines faded. This is the end of that story. Now tell me in the comments, what's your story? I'll read out the most interesting ones in the next video. Do not forget to hit a like button and subscribe. See you.